So we need to talk about the most shocking moment in Chapter 3 of the Book of Boba Fett. In fact, I would say it's the most shocking event in the entire story so far. Of course, this is going to contain spoilers, so if you don't know what I'm talking about, first watch the episode and then come back. But hold on. This is not just shocking because of what we see happen, the murder of all these Tusken Raiders that we just gotten to know, that we started to appreciate, we started to see all the culture. But we were also shocked about how they just got rid of that entire group and that entire storyline as if it meant nothing, as if it meant nothing to us. As a viewer, we had high hopes for this new culture that we started to finally appreciate after kind of disregarding the importance of the Tusken Raiders for decades. And people were upset with this episode because of that. How can you do that? And it seemed so emotionally heavy compared to the rest of this episode that felt a little bit fluff. A bit even, not on par with what we've seen so far, especially the chase scene. However, there is something going on here. There is something that you may have missed, and that is essential to the story. There is something that I think most viewers overlooked. And you know what? I think the writers and the director, the creators of the Book of Boba Fett, wanted to deliberately misdirect us here. They wanted us to miss this detail because they knew how important it would be if we later on discover what truly happened. Let me explain. I told you before in my videos on the Book of Boba Fett that the writers were obviously inspired by the story of Moses in the Bible. The entire character arc of Boba Fett in this story seems to be parallel to what happens to Moses, who is a stranger in a strange land, grew up at the court of Pharaoh, then discovers that he doesn't belong among the Egyptians. The slaves that are working for the Pharaoh are actually his kin. That's his family. That's truly where he belongs. And then he becomes the leader that unites the tribes of Israel and leads them to the Promised Land. Okay, so very clear parallels with what happens in the Book of Boba Fett. So, why would they kill that entire analogy by murdering, by having a certain party? We don't know exactly who did this. We are meant to believe that it is the Nikto biker gang, but it seems way too gruesome. And if this is Star Wars, and it is, of course, this should make us think of similar scenes in previous stories, like, for instance, the murder of the Jawas in A New Hope. We are made to believe that it was the Empire, or that it was the Tusken Raiders, but in fact it was the Empire that wanted us to believe that it was the Tusken Raiders. And Obi-Wan Kenobi is already a bit skeptical. And I think that should already be a first sign that there may be more to this scene. It may not be what you thought happened. So that's a first clue. Then, of course, this is also referring us to the gruesome murder of the Tusken Raiders in the prequels, where Anakin Skywalker wants to save his mother, discovers that she's been tortured and dies there and then, and it just creates this rage, and he kills and murders the entire camp, not just the adult Tusken Raiders, but also the children, the innocent. And it is the most inconceivable thing that he did, and as a Star Wars fan, I still don't understand how George Lucas got away with making us believe that Padme, that Amidala, she just dismissed that. I'm still going to love you, despite what he just confessed to her, what he did. He murdered these Tusken Raiders. Maybe it's because Amidala didn't have that connection with the Tusken Raiders, just like we haven't had for decades. But anyway, it's clear that this event in Chapter 3 refers to what we've seen previously happen. But why just repeat what we've already seen? Unless that's exactly what the writers want us to believe. Let's take a look at that scene. It happens in the first part of the story after we've seen the attack on the palace, and then all of a sudden we see we get actually two sequences that happen not in the streets of Mos Espa, but outside of Mos Espa, and we see that Boba Fett is riding this bantha, and the first few shots that we see are the Tusken Raiders that are looking at him riding that big beast, which apparently is a thing that Boba likes to do. He's been doing that for many years. He's even been riding these monsters that are like 10 times as big as a Rancor. And we see that they admire him, they look up to him. He is now one of them, right? And then that first sequence, which is still very upbeat, shows us a few close-ups of a number of the Tusken Raiders that we've gotten to know. Of course, you've got the background players, you've got this camp, a few tents. There are about, I would guess, about 20 or maybe even 30 Tusken Raiders, including some kids. But there are 3 Tusken Raiders that we've gotten to know in the previous 2 chapters. The first one, of course, is their leader. It's the one with the slightly different mask. He's got more armor on him. He clearly looks a bit more regal. There are some red accents in his clothing. That's the first one. The second one that we get to know is, of course, the kid, who has a nice story arc. He starts with beating up Boba Fett and trying to, force him to dig up these black melons. And the kid wants to humiliate Boba Fett when he's still very vulnerable, to show his superiority and basically to show off to the rest of the clan. He's on the verge of becoming an adult himself, so he needs to show that he is a powerful warrior. And then we have this third Tusken Raider who is teaching Boba Fett how to wield a gaffi stick, and he's been given this practice wooden stick first, learns all these fighting moves, and then ultimately ends up mastering the fighting techniques, making his own gaffi stick and being embraced as part of the family. And these 3 Tusken Raiders that actually, they don't really get a face, but they don't get a name, but they do get a personality. These actually may be part of the same literal family, blood family. The leader may actually be a father. And if you look closely at these previous scenes from previous chapters, you will see that these 3 are always depicted together. So you've got the leader, the father. Then you've got the Tusken Raider who trained Boba Fett. We know that she was played by a stunt double and gymnast who was very honored. The actress was very honored to get that role. And I think that's important to know that is a female Tusken warrior, because then it's pretty obvious to me that we are supposed to think that the child, the kid Tusken Raider, is their child, their son. And this is reinforced by these flashbacks that we see in the vicinity of all these scenes, where Boba Fett reminds himself or remembers how he himself was a child on Kamino, wakes up in the middle of the night, runs to the windows and sees how his father flies away in his spaceship. And so it's a moment of separation. It's a moment that Boba Fett feels alone as a child, abandoned by his father, which later on becomes, of course, the biggest trauma of his life, when his father is actually killed and he has no more family. And this is what makes the emotional connection to what happens between him and the Tusken Raiders so important to us, because we empathize with what Boba Fett lived as a child. Okay, but I'm not done yet, so stay tuned. What did we see next? Very briefly afterwards, so we've seen this child. There's one detail that they show us in this previous, very optimistic scene, and that is the child has his little stick. Of course, he's not old enough to have a gaffi stick, but he's got this wooden stick that he uses to to beat Boba Fett in chapter 1, right? So they focus on that image with the kid with the stick in his hands. And that is on purpose, because the next few scenes that we see where Boba Fett returns to the encampment of the Tusken Raiders, to his shock, of course, everyone has been murdered. All the tents have been burnt down, and this is very much reminiscent of the horror of the murder of the Tusken Raiders by Anakin Skywalker, even though they didn't show us that much of what Anakin Skywalker did. It was just inferred. It also shows us the pyre that Boba Fett makes to burn the bodies of these Tusken Raiders, which clearly evokes the same type of pyre that Obi-Wan and Luke Skywalker make to burn the bodies of the slaughtered Jawas. And there is something in that scene that I think we are meant to believe, but we're deliberately misdirected here. And that is, after throwing a few of those bodies on the pyre, and after we've seen a close-up of one of the 3 Tusken Raiders that we've gotten to know, and it happens to be the leader of the Tusken tribe, the father figure, that is not by accident. The father figure is murdered here. We then see that Boba Fett picks up this wooden stick, and it's filmed in such a way, it's a close-up, so you realize this is important. And we recognize the stick, we've just seen it a few minutes ago in the hands of that kid. We are meant to believe that the kid was also murdered. And he throws the stick on the fire after he's already put the big staff of the leader onto the fire. He now takes the small stick, and it symbolizes the child that he buries. And you see that he's distraught, and this was his family, and now he's burning them. Or did he? Why do they only show us a close-up of the face mask of the leader, of the father? We never see the body of the child. We never see the body of the female Tusken Raider who trained him. Why would they omit that? That doesn't make sense. If you really want to make us feel emotional, you're going to show us not just symbolically, but just this little wooden stick of the child. You would show us a close-up of the father, and then of the mother, and then of the child. And then we'd be all in tears, and we would be even more mad at the writers that they made us go through this. And then follow this dramatic moment with this stupid chase in the streets of Mos Espa, which really is so fluff and so insignificant. Why? I think a lot of people were angry with this, with the writers of this 3rd chapter, because it felt like it didn't do justice to the importance of the Tusken Raiders. But what if the child and the female Tusken Raider weren't among the victims? What if we are supposed to discover later on that there were actually survivors of the massacre? If only because of the number of people that you see on the pyre, there are maybe 5, 6 Tusken Raiders that he's burning. But we've seen a much larger group than that. And there is this overview where the camera is panning down on the camp. You see that the tents are burned, and then in a few walking shots, you see the silhouettes of a few Tusken Raiders, but definitely not 20. So what I'm thinking is, the child and its mother, I'm just going to assume that it's the mother, they escaped. And you know why this makes so much sense? I have to go back to what I said before. This is inspired by the story of Moses. How does the story of Moses start? With the Pharaoh deciding that all the newborn sons of the Jews have to be murdered. It's an execution order. And who escapes that horrible fate, this gruesome murder of all these innocent children? Moses. And who was the one who saved the little baby Moses so that later on he could become this leader of his people, the one who, with the help of God, brought the slaves to the promised land, from slavery to true freedom? It was the child's mother. She put him in a basket. She made sure that he survived. And later on, she came back to actually take care of the child at the court of the Pharaoh. And the Pharaoh didn't even realize that this, Jewish slave that he hired was actually the mother of the child. So the story of Moses has exactly this same idea that I'm speculating. I have no proof of this, but it would make so much sense if you see how much the story of Moses inspired the story of the book of Boba Fett, for this to happen also to this mother and child that we get to know in this story. But wait, there is more. There is more. What could be the ultimate purpose of this scene? Why does this gruesome murder take place in the middle of a story in the middle of a chapter that on the whole is kind of forgettable? Why does it happen here? I think because it is putting things in place for what will happen next and what will actually maybe happen in the final episode of the series. Because I think there is more to this child, there is more to this mother figure, and there is more to Boba Fett's connection with these two. There is another story in the Bible that talks about a decision by a leader to kill all the children, all the newborn children, or newborn sons. This time it's not the Pharaoh, but it is a king, Herod. And he's scared because he heard these prophecies about a new leader that would stand up, rise up, and be the one who liberates his people from the oppression. And he knows about these prophecies, and he's like, okay, but if that child is now born, as I hear from these magi from the east, I got to do something about that. I got to kill that child. And so there's this order, which is still, it's like an Order 66 in the Bible, all these children are murdered. It's a massacre. The Catholic Church celebrates that even liturgically on the feast of the Innocents, the Holy Innocents. But there is one child who escapes with his mother and with his foster father, his adoptive father. It's not a real father, but it's the father who is supposed to take care of this child and bring the child and his mother to safety. Of course, I'm talking about Mary, Joseph, and Jesus. It's not an accident that these early stories about the life of Christ reflect what happened to Moses, because we are meant to understand that Jesus is a new Moses. He too is a true liberator of his people. He is going to save them from the ultimate enemy, death itself. Again, think of how important these stories are in the Abrahamic religions. This is something that is so well known by a large part of mankind. And if Star Wars is all about telling, passing over or giving to a new generations these old stories but repackaged in a different form, then yes, this is probably they would be stupid not to use that as an inspiration for what happens between the Tusken Raiders and Boba Fett. Let me explain. Boba Fett is becoming part of the family, right? That's what the first two chapters showed us. But, so he gets to know this child, becomes very important to him. He starts to form a connection with him, has a connection with the mother as well. And now the father is killed off, the leader of the Tuskens. So the father figure is no longer there. What if the mother helped the child escape. She is a fearsome warrior. She knows how to fight. She taught it to Boba Fett, so it makes sense. She's a protective mother who knows how to save her child. Now that the father figure is dead, what if Boba Fett is meant to become the foster father, just like Joseph became the foster father for Jesus and the husband of Mary, and helped them escape to Egypt, far away from the streets of Jerusalem and Bethlehem and Nazareth, far away from the streets where the Romans were still a threat, brought them to safety until he got a sign, an angel that told him, hey, now it's safe, you can return. What if this is exactly what's going to happen in the book of Boba Fett? And Boba Fett will discover later on in the story that the child and its mother are still alive. And he, of course, needs to help them because he knows how it feels to lose your family. And he will become a father figure. Remember the theme of family, how often that is stressed, even by the mayor in Mos Espa. You know, it's difficult to run a family. What if this family theme is part of the story arc of Boba Fett, and he's supposed to become a father for the mother and her child? And then, and this is the final thing that I wanted to tell you, what if this is exactly how the story is going to end? We know from interviews with Tim Morrison that the final episode is going to be huge. And it's going to be very emotional. Now, emotions don't just happen. You need to set them up story-wise. And how do you do that? By creating a roller coaster of emotions. And that is definitely what we felt in chapter 3, right? We were like distraught. People were mad. I've seen some yelling on Reddit, on Discord. People were like, how could they do that? Maybe they wanted us to feel like this. They wanted us to be outraged and just frustrated by this event. And the only thing they can tell us, because then we would know what would happen, but I'm here to tell you that, is let's just wait and see. This is not the end. This is not how it ends. Just like with the Hutts, you think that they leave, but are they really, truly? There's always more to the story than we think. So, what if the whole plan is for this child to be ultimately to become the new leader of the tribe, the new leader of the Tusken Raiders, who have an ancestral claim on the planet of Tatooine? They know every grain of sand. It is their promised land. But now they need a new leader. And yes, Boba Fett is temporarily now the leader. He is the Moses, right? Who leads them to freedom, who wants them to own Tatooine as their promised land, the place where they are free to live out their culture and their faith and whatnot. But Boba Fett is not from Tatooine. He was not born on a desert planet. He's born on Kamino, where there's just water everywhere and oceans. So he may be the Moses figure who leads them to this new future. But in the story of Moses, guess what happens? Moses dies before he can lead his people into the new land. And it is his successor that takes the lead and brings them into the promised land, these tribes of Israel. What if they do the same with Boba Fett? This entire story, the book of Boba Fett, sounds like a Bible book, right? The book of Boba Fett is all about this new father figure, this leader, this shepherd, who brings these slaves to freedom. But before, he's not meant to be their leader in the future. He doesn't belong on Tatooine. Tatooine is not his planet. Yes, he is the temporary leader. But what if he passes it on to someone who is truly from the planet? And who is the only character that the writers are setting up who is on the verge of becoming an adult to take his responsibility in the story? It's the kid, it's the child. Why do we keep seeing these flashbacks of young Boba Fett on Kamino looking at his father flying away, knowing that now he is all alone and he's got to forge his own future. Could it be that they want us to make the connection ultimately? That Boba Fett's destiny and the arc of his life is now going to be passed on to the new generation, and you've got this child who has now lost his father, just like Boba Fett did when he was young on Kamino. And he is supposed to be the new leader. What might happen towards the end is that we will see that when Boba Fett has gone to the extreme, ends up sacrificing his life. Another huge theme in the Bible. It's all about self-sacrifice. What is the biggest sign of love, the biggest form of love? It's giving your life for your friends. Jesus himself tells it. So what if Boba Fett is going to do the same? Just like so many other characters. Darth Vader, Anakin Skywalker, redeems himself. How? By sacrificing his own life in order to save his son. I bet you, if they don't do this, I'm going to write a letter to Lucasfilm and just put me on the team as a biblical scholar to give you some ideas for future stories. But man, it would be so stupid not to use this for the book of Boba Fett. He's going to sacrifice his life for his friends, for his family, for the boy. And I think what I would do as the last shot of the book of Boba Fett is this Tusken boy picking up the helmet of his new father, his foster father, the one who gave his life, the one who he mistreated in the first chapter of the book, and now he loves him more than anyone else because he went to, he's like the shepherd who goes out for the lost sheep. What if Boba Fett goes and searches for this child and finds it, just like Jesus gives his description of the shepherd that seeks the lost sheep and brings it back to the fold, into the fold, and then he picks up the helmet and puts it on his head, and he is the new Boba Fett. That's what I think. And that is why I think it is so important to suspend your judgment when it comes to the story until we've seen the rest of the puzzle. Let me know in the comments what you think. Did this theory, because it's just a theory, this may be completely, I may be completely wrong, but what do you think of this idea? And does it change your perception of this third chapter? It may not. It doesn't make that chase in the streets of Mos Espa any better. But maybe it changes your mind on this emotional, this shocking scene in chapter 3. Just let me know. I'd love to continue. Maybe there's stuff that I missed. Maybe you have arguments why I'm wrong. Let me know. We're all here to learn together. But thank you so much. If you like this video, you want to see my next video, because there's so much more I want to explain about chapter 3, then subscribe to the channel, give this video a like so more Star Wars fans can find it, and help me spread the word. I'm just a tiny Star Wars YouTuber, and there are some amazing content creators out there, but I want to be part of that family. I love Star Wars too much to stay in my little corner of YouTube, so you can help me do that as well. All right, I'm signing off. Thanks for watching, and may the Force be with you.